two people visited the Bay Area last weekend. One is Mike Pompeo. All right. Another one is Miles Yu. Miles Yu is his, he's the first China policy advisor. All right. And then they came to the Bay Area. What's special about it? They came here to speak to mainly Chinese community. All right. The organizer is called Hong Kong Freedom Beacon. All right. It's a newly set up organization in response to the CCP's suppression in Hong Kong. It's a U.S.-based organization, mainly by Hong Kongers here. So they hold this event. I think Kathy probably reported to you over 2,000 people, right, attended the three events. Quite impressive. Yeah, I think Pompeo was really surprised, pleasantly.
Right. And
the Chinese community was quite surprised, pleasantly too, because when Pompeo spoke about Trump's administration's policy on China, they were like, wow, how could you read it so accurately?
Right. So in one of the speeches, actually, it's Mike Pompeo's first speech in the Bay Area last weekend. He actually broke down the central premise that the Trump administration understood about the CCP and then the three pillars that they took to deal with the CCP as an action. So I think it's a very noteworthy to learn about that. So that he delivered a speech in Livermore. Actually, it's north of San Francisco at a restaurant, quite a good restaurant. It's called Uncle Yu. In the speech, Pompeo actually said that, first of all, he said actually the U.S.-China policy was backwards a long time ago for at least past 20 years.
American policy was backwards with respect to the Chinese Communist Party. We had it wrong. We've had it wrong since 1972. We certainly had it wrong for at least the last 20 years. You should know, this is not partisan. This is not about Republicans or Democrats. This is about tyranny and freedom. For the first time in an awfully long time, the United States redirected our energy and made clear that the Chinese Communist Party would not last forever.
He also revealed that the CCP leaders have power, but also a lot of fear. Why?
I also saw a set of leaders in the Chinese Communist Party that had tremendous power, but also feared people like you. They fear us. They fear us because we're prepared to speak the truth.
Yeah, so he said that they fear people like us who speak the truth. So what kind of truth? He went on to say that we are prepared to speak the basic truth about human dignity and kindness, and that each life is special. That's what the CCP fear about. He said he come to this central notion with is that an atheist regime does not value human life, because at the end it's so essential for American people to understand that. So that's the huge difference between the CCP and America, is that it's atheist. It doesn't value human life. And then Mike Pompeo also just explained how the Trump administration was able to correctly understood the CCP's nature. He said it's just like how President Reagan confronted the former Soviet Union, its ideology. So what the Trump administration understood about the CCP is that it's an ideological regime, not only persecute its own people, but also try to dominate the world. So he said once you understand this central premise about what CCP is, then the actions to deal with it is very straightforward. He offered three pillars of how to deal with it. The first one,
that negotiating with regimes like this is not possible. They do not understand life the way that each of us understands life. They do not understand power the same way each of us understands it.
So he said that really, if you think, oh, just treat the CCP nicely, then you will get something. He said, no, it's not possible. It's because its way of understanding life and power is very drastically different from how we understand it. So he said that we have to make a case in our country of the evilness of CCP and versus the greatness of the Chinese people. And as you can remember, it's the first administration in the entire American history is that the Trump administration specifically distinguished between CCP versus China and Chinese people. So, and then Pompeo offered the second pillar.
And so we had to first make the case here in our country of the evils of the Chinese Communist Party and the greatness of the Chinese people.
Okay. All right. So he's actually gives some example is that how they shut down the Chinese consulate in Houston.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also he told a story of the U.S. Governors Association where he was invited to speak. And first, initially, those are the governors of Republican parties and Democrat parties. But initially, they didn't pay any attention to him until he said, actually, I've obtained a classified document where it shows, have a table of every U.S. governor and the status at CCP, whether they are whether the governor is friendly to CCP or hostile to CCP or is being worked on. So that caught the attention of all those 40 governors, and each one of them just texting to their chief of staff saying, I need to get a hold of that classified file. So what does it mean? He said, Ms. Pompeo said, we really need to understand the intention of CCP and make sure that, we will fight and win the information war they are, just waging. So what's the third pillar to deal with the CCP?
We call it distrust but verify.
Yeah, so it's distrust and verify. That we heard a lot actually during the Trump era. Mike Pompeo said a lot. It is actually based on what's the Reagan administration said, right? Trust.
Yeah. Back then, it's the 1980s, Reagan's policy saying, trust and verify. At that time, the value that Reagan added is the verify. Mm-hmm. We trust you, but we'll verify it. But after so many instances, many decades, 4 decades of of dealing with the CCP, America has learned that not a single promise of the CCP can be trusted. Look at Hong Kong. When they took over Hong Kong, they signed this Sino UK, agreement. They insisted register that treaty with the United Nations. Now they just scrapped it just like that. So Trump and Pompeo said, distrust and verify. I don't trust whatever you say. Yeah. Whatever you sign, I don't trust you.
And look at the pandemic, right? Including the origin of the virus and also how they concealed and lied about the pandemic. So Mike Pompeo just said, not a thing that the CCP said we can trust. Yeah. That's why, the third pillar for dealing with the CCP is distrust and verify. But overall, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, he said he's quite confident to win the battle against the CCP, and that he emphasized the essence of how to win the battle.
We will prevail. As Elmer said, I'm enormously optimistic. It is often very dark before we get to the right place, but I believe the world is on the right track now. In the end, every good battle about the way we treat each other as human beings is won with the moral courage and clarity that I have experienced here this evening. Thank you for that.